Welcome to the Embodiment Matters podcast with me, Erin Giesemann Rabke, and my beloved Carl Rabke. We don't have the luxury of living in ordinary times, but rather we live in extraordinary ones where the way we live in the next decade will make a huge difference in the future of life on planet Earth. We aspire in this tapestry of rich conversations drawn from a variety of wise perspectives to share resources to help you embody the wisdom, compassion, and skillful actions that are needed during these times. You can find out more about our classes and sign up for our newsletter at embodimentmatters.com. You can also become a supporting member of our podcast with a small monthly donation. Look for Embodiment Matters at patreon.com.
Welcome, dear listeners. My name is Alexandre, and I am a dear friend and brother of Carl and Erin. I'm so delighted to introduce our next conversation as part of a new podcast subseries of Embodiment Matters called Men of Depth and Soul. This series was born out of our deep grief related to unimaginative and outdated views of manhood and the harmful impacts of uninitiated men in positions of power we see today across the world. This, alongside with the dream we have for more boys and men to remember the sacredness, potency, and beauty of their presence as human kin, needed for the thriving of the whole. As part of this series, we wanted to sit in council and ceremonial conversation with elders and wisdom keepers and continue to listen for and remember together what is being asked of us as men in response to these critical times we find ourselves in. For our second interview as part of Men of Depth and Soul, I am so honored to introduce a beloved teacher, mentor, and dear brother of Carl and I, the poet, author, and founder of Soul Water Rising, Dr. Jaiya John. Jaiya has written over 20 books, including the powerful medicine of his poetry, storytelling, and prose, many of which have been life-altering for us and people we know. And even more, listening to the living poetry that pours forth from Jaiya's voice and soul in real time, and the spontaneous wisdom of his oracular divination has continued to move our hearts so much that we felt like it would be such a gift to the community to have him join us in sacred conversation about the context of men in these times through his elder eyes. In this conversation, we journey through many topics and inquiries, ranging from Jaiya's articulation of freedom work, how men are impacted by legacies of what Jaiya refers to as the superiority-inferiority virus that come from capitalist caste systems, why reviving ceremonial and sacred ways of being together as men are essential, why we must preserve the holiness of Eros and cultivate generational modes of discerning how to embody Eros in a ripened way, how the potency of men's gentleness can benefit all beings, and much more nutrient-dense goodness. We hope you enjoy this interview and transmission from Jaiya, especially as much as we did. If you'd like to know more about Jaiya John's work, you can head to his website, jaiyajohn.com. If you'd like to connect with me and my offerings, you can reach me at ahealingbridge.com. And if you'd like to support this podcast of Embodiment Matters, you can do so by heading to Patreon and looking for Embodiment Matters. And if you're moved by this podcast, it is always appreciated if you would be willing to share it with your community and those who might resonate. Again, we want to thank you for being here, and we hope you enjoy this conversation.
Welcome, welcome, dear brothers, Jaiya John, Alexandre. So good to be together.
It is so. It is so. Thank you both. Thank you both for being present with me and for the honor of your invitation.
Yeah. So, Jaya, I'm wondering if you could just reflect a little bit to begin on where we are in the story of men in this time.
Mm, in this time, the story of men. I love the language you used. It has me thinking of this film I watched long ago called The Children of Men, which I believe was a novel, adapted from a novel. Um, we are the children of men, and as I gaze upon garden and reflect on where we are in the story of men, I would say that because as men we are human beings, that where we are in our story is where human beings are in our story, in our human story. You know, we are not a separate species. We are the same organism. And when we look at the human story globally, and these days, in this season, in this era, we see and we witness and we feel the tides of transformation and change, shifting, breaking apart and breaking down. We feel the decomposition of unnatural things, and we feel uh, the revelry and the revival of natural things like plants breaking up and out through concrete, um, in a concrete graveyard of buildings in decay. We see the persistence of life breaking up and out through the cracks and the fissures. We see this in our human season today, and we feel this, I believe, in our journey as men. A time, therefore, where all the paradigms that we have lived in as men and held on to as men and gripped often desperately to as men, all the paradigms, the schemas, the ideas and ideologies that once may have felt more sturdy and solid and stable, um, even if they were not life affirming, beneficent, benign, and vitalizing, even if those structures were not good for us, were harmful. We held them, we held them tightly. We lived within them, and many men did not question these structures that live in our brains and bodies and live in our behaviors and in our relations with ourselves and the world. And I would just say, and I would love to hear how you two feel. I would just say that we now find ourselves in a place where the great questioning is erupting more and more by the day. The great questioning of these structures and ideas and paradigms. The much of what you could consider to be delusion or illusion is showing itself. The curtain is parting, the veil is lifting, and so there's a questioning. There's, of course, when this happens, you know, when an earthquake happens, when the earth shakes, all of a sudden, in that moment, I don't know if any of you uh, have experienced a significant earthquake. Of course, we have them here, right? When you're in that moment where the earth itself, upon which you've grounded your whole life, is shaking, is trembling, is violently rippling, and everything that you know to be solid seems to be no longer solid but in fluid state. Buildings, trees, grass, even the breeze seems to be toppling. Your body is bouncing, the house is shaking, things are falling. In that moment, a questioning occurs. Is all of this going to survive? What happens if it does not? Will I survive? And what am I? What am I? Because my identity is based upon things being stable and secure. And everything is now literally being thrown into question. Will I ever come back down to earth again? And so, what we know from human nature, human condition, and the psychology of existing is that when things are uncertain for us, we can be vulnerable to great heaving waves of doubt and fear. And so, in our journey as men, we find all the things that humans are experiencing. We find a great deal of birthing happening. We feel a great deal of dying happening. We feel many men are flush with excitement and euphoria of liberation, feeling like I am finally getting to be myself or finding my way to myself. And then you have many men, we are experiencing great doubt and fear and insecurity. And many men have been trained and conditioned generationally to respond to doubt and fear and uncertainty with violence, physical violence, emotional violence, verbal violence, relational violence, spiritual violence, um, violence as a kind of um, delusional blanket we wrap around ourselves to feel more secure. Correct. And so this is where I feel um, we may be these days. There's incredible unfolding happening, and we must tend to that. And there is incredible liberation happening. We must tend to that. And there is great fear and suffering and confusion, and we must tend to that.
Yeah, I love all the so many images and the decomposition of what is unnatural. At the same time, it feels like this clamoring for the unnatural to stay together as these forces, liberatory forces, are kind of coming from the ground up.
Yes, yes, Carl, you're right. It's the it's that what seems like an eternal dynamic between the falling apart and the deconstruction of what is false, and then the panicked holding on to that what is false, that very same structure. Panic, panic, panic is happening it, from within those whose condition leaves them um, very dependent emotionally upon the status quo in the way things have been. And it's like when we swim out into the ocean and we're not alone. There are other people there in the ocean, and some people feel that they are in bliss in the ocean. Some people feel they are drowning in the ocean. And we know what happens when a person feels they are drowning. What is their response? It is panic, and they will take anyone and everything down with them as they tell the story that I am drowning. I am drowning. And at that point, it doesn't matter to a person who believes they're drowning. It doesn't matter whether they bring others to their death as well. Um, there's just that panicked, primal flailing, which is violent. It's never gentle. it, that panic is never gentle. So we we could say, in this moment on Earth, that which is existing in a gentle way may be a reflection of being in touch with the natural composition, with the divine fabric uh, and truth of things. That which is existing in a gentle way, that which is existing in a violent way could be seen as a reflection um, of a very dependent relationship with oppressive, um, life destroying ways of being. And so, as men, what do we seek within our own hearts? And what do we seek in our relations and with the world? Um, Maybe we would benefit from seeking what is gentle. And yet, our conditioning is so deeply ingrained, to think of love as weak, to think as mercy and compassion and grace as weak, and gentleness as weak. So, is this not what we as men have been trained to be averse to be allergic to, that which we perceive as weak? I imagine that comes out a lot in the expressions of the men that you gather with. Like maybe this inner quandary. Do they admit to you that they often wish for more gentleness and strive for more gentleness, but then feel conflicted because it doesn't feel like that's what a man is supposed to be? Do they express this to you?
Absolutely. That is a story that we hear over and over. And I would say that was the beginning of my story too. Um, yeah, like this gentleness, it almost feels like a relic now, that we're picking up again and looking at and seeing, wow, this is actually a part of our humanity. And it's been so denied. Um, and it makes me think also, Jaya, of in your book, Freedom. I was so struck in the beginning that you intentionally, I imagine, chose to bring in a cosmological sense, that we're born with these two spirits, with love and then with fear. And then with the fear, I appreciated how you were bringing in the context of the virus, and you were talking about this allergy just a moment ago, this virus of superiority, inferiority, and how much so many of us men and humans and non-humans too, I imagine all the land is feeling it too. The impact of this virus. And if it's okay, can I read a short excerpt of yours? Because I've got a question for you,
Yeah,
Jaya.
I would love that. Please, please. Thank you.
Yeah, so you wrote, the entire world will fall apart if we inferior ones are in front, on top, at the center, first, or in control. We are terrified of building and creating our own lives, our own systems and societies. We do not believe in ourselves. If any of us dares to challenge the superior ones of their supremacy, we will destroy that one who threatens to ruin our comfortable reality. We suffer oppression, but that is our fate. It is who we are. We run from our heritage, our history, our ancestors, our traditions and customs and rituals and ways. We run from our language and values. We run from our natural bodies, hair, and expression. We run from abundance and joy, from love and kindness, from anything soft and nurturing. We belong to hard days and hard ways. We will live in this pain forever. And part of my question around that for you, Jaya, is around this kind of colonized way of acting out from that superior inferior virus, and the way that that has been exported in across all of the world into indigenous traditional cultures and whatnot, and how there's this caricature of liberation and freedom that is exported by these colonized ways sometimes, and how it continues to destroy cultures and also enlist men. It enlists men, right? And I'm curious if you could speak to this kind of pseudo freedom that is used sometimes to control and puppeteer the commons, so to speak. And what do you mean when you're talking about freedom and liberation? What are you dreaming when you speak those words?
Wow, that's a beautiful question, Alexandre. Thank you. What am I dreaming? Yeah. So first, you know, this, and I loved your language for these patterns and these dynamics of exporting um, the pseudo freedom and liberation. The passage you just read is really um, positioned within the context of what it means to be categorized as inferior within a caste system. And that there are those that are categorized as superior and inferior, favored and unfavored. It's another language I used in the book. And your passage that you read really describes what self hatred and self rejection and self enslavement, internalized inferiority feels like, what its narrative is in the mind, in the body, the inner narrative. That's what that passage really is a portrait of. You know, when you mentioned the exporting of the pseudo liberalism and the liberation and freedom, I thought instantly about the ways in which, and the book also goes into this, the ways in which inevitably souls who have lived and acted in a revolutionary manner to bring their people out of suffering and out of oppression, those souls inevitably become caricaturized and watered down by the mainstream, by the status quo, by those who are the gatekeepers who have the power to control media and therefore narrative and story, who control government, who control lives. They ultimately always water down these revolutionary souls. They water down the ferocity of a Jesus, of a Buddha, um, of they water down the ferocity of a Malcolm X, a Martin Luther King, the ferocity of a Gandhi, the ferocity of a Joan of Arc, of a Frida Kahlo. Water down, make palatable and safe for our thing. You know, the Italian mafia, Cosa Nostra, our thing, right? Well, every society of oppression, every oppressive system has its thing, which it knows. It is very clear what it is maintaining, and it has language and catchphrases if we pay attention for how it wants to maintain its thing and preserve its thing and make its thing great again. It has its language. It's speaking to each other, one another, saying, we've got to keep our thing together. And one of the ways that they keep their oppressive arrangement going is by watering down and diluting the essence, the actuality, the fervor, the fever, the passion, the radicalness of anyone and anything that becomes identified, noticed, lifted up, celebrated, honored, revered, regarded as being at the forefront of a liberation movement. And so this is how we arrive at a pseudo freedom. You've seen in my language, in my work, my self-reference as a freedom worker. And then I see many people coming from um, cultural demographics that position them at the top of the caste system, and they appropriate that. They intentionally and or unintentionally interpret my language to mean that we're talking about the freedom to have individual, self-centered, um, latitude to do as I want, to be comfortable, to be convenient, to reach my dreams, to fulfill my desires. Freedom work becomes cast by these people um, as a thing that actually is a palatable thing within the caste arrangement, within the oppressive arrangement. So this is how the watering happens. It's an intentional watering down and diluting of the full fire of what oppressed communities mean by liberation and freedom. We mean very different things when we use that language than when people use that language who've lived their lives and lived their generations being favored by a caste system. So for example, when we talk about the oppression of girls and women by the patriarchy throughout time, when women talk about and celebrate freedom in the sovereignty of their bodies, agency with their bodies, they mean something very, very different than when some men come along, pick up that language, and apply it to their own life and talk about freedom with their bodies. Very, very different meanings. You can never set aside the historical context. And by history, we don't mean the past. We mean all that has been and continues into our present and is already reaching for our future and our offspring's generations if we don't tend to it. Context is everything. The context of a people's journey all the way into the present and reaching into the future. When people who have been oppressed by colonization talk about freedom and liberation, they don't mean the same thing as people who are celebrating the very oppressive society that has harmed those people. So another example is the 4th of July. Frederick Douglass, the former enslaved soul, who was a statesman, um, who in the United States um, and beyond, in his lifetime, agitated for freedom. And he expressed in writing and oration his famous piece, What to the Slave is the 4th of July? And Frederick Douglass was essentially saying that you as a society are celebrating your independence while hypocritically at the same time enslaving my people and keeping us from our own sovereignty and independence. And so your 4th of July is not our 4th of July. Entirely different beings and natures. For me, when I speak, because you asked this question, when I speak of freedom and liberation, I am referring to the dissolution of all oppressive structures that dehumanize us, that devalue and diminish us, that erase us, that distort us, that appropriate from us, extract and exploit. I am referring to freedom from that, freedom from oppression, freedom from the violence and the hate, freedom from the constant experiencing in our bodies of being unsafe in the world, freedom from that. Not freedom to feel good, not freedom to have an easy life, to be comfortable in life, to not be caused or forced to reckon with the truth of things. This is not the freedom that that beats in my heart. And so when we apply that to the journey of men, one of the challenges I find is that unless a man has been willful enough to choose to go into his depths of depths within his soul and examine his existence, examine his identity, examine the way he has behaved in the world in relationship to himself and others and all living things, unless he is willing to confront the history of men in relation to all living things, including women, unless a man has done that deep, soulful gardening for years and years, it is going to be a challenge for that man to empathically experience what a woman might mean by freedom and liberation. And until a man can empathically embody, somatically feel what a woman means by freedom and liberation, it is difficult, therefore, for that same man to experience within himself actual spiritual freedom and liberation. He's intellectually puzzling out what it means for him to be free as a man without consideration of what it means to be free as a living thing, then all that means is he's bouncing around ideas from within the high castle of his caste position. Until we destroy the castle of identity in which we encase ourselves comfortably, confront it, touch it, feel it, and destroy it so that there is no castle wall between us and all living things. No castle wall, no moats, no segregation, no siloing, no insulation until a man can go to those places cosmically, spiritually, emotionally, until he can be haunted, let himself be haunted by the harm that has been done throughout time, by the reign of men. Then he cannot access the grieving necessary to completely dissolve his beingness, his identity, become nothingness, so that he can begin to flower as a full living thing. This is the path we're on as men. We must access all that has been existing outside of our castle. And we must be willing to touch it and taste it and feel it and smell it and come to know it intimately. And the only way to do that is to destroy the castle, destroy the patriarchy, destroy the convenience of being positioned at the top of the caste. This is what moves through me. This is what spirit flows through me.
Yeah, goosebumps all over with that, Jaya. Yeah, and as you speak, I'm just so moved by the the soul death or the limitation of human experience that exists if you're in the castle, if you're at the top, or even if these structures exist, that limits our sense of who and what and how we can be if we're not actively doing that deep gardening and seeing where and how these live and how to unravel and dismantle them.
Yes, Carl, yes. You just said something that penetrated. Just the existence of the structures blocks and barricades and blinds us from seeing and feeling and touching and experiencing the entirety of creation. So that when others are trying to testify as to their truth and their experience, we can't truly hear it because the structures that exist all around us that we live within, uh, they are like a myopia and a cataract on our vision. We cannot see clearly. We can get glimpses. We can get glimpses, but we are required to actually remove the obstructions, not just from our lives, but from all lives, in order to finally see and feel clearly one another. Until we can do that with one another, we can't see and feel clearly ourselves. So we are truly handicapped in the context of manhood and what it means to be a man. We're handicapped by these obstructions because we could think of our single body as an organism, but in truth, manhood is an organism. Humanhood is a larger organism within which manhood exists. And then creation is a larger organism yet than that. But it's all a living, breathing thing. And, we could sit on a mountaintop, feel the sky on our skin, feel bliss, and say, I am fully alive in this moment, and I see far and wide. Then, if society builds up around your mountaintop all these constructs, all these artifices, all these skyscrapers of domination, dominion, conquest, control, violence, and they build them up all around you until they are so high that you cannot see out into the distance any longer. In some ways, it doesn't matter that you're sitting on a piece of land that is a mountaintop because you are completely encased within this structure, this violent structure. And so your ability to experience creation as a natural thing, and therefore yourself as a natural thing, is diminished. It is hampered. It is impeded. And so I say this because I do feel we're at a place in the journey as human beings where we feel that if we can just sort of create a bubble of living well and living with equanimity in our individual space, that somehow is the destination that we call freedom and liberation. We feel like if I'm eating right and I'm treating people well and I'm wearing the right clothes and I'm associating with the right causes, then like that's it, right? That's the um, that's the that's the destination, that's the prize, that's the reward. That's I'm a good person. I'm a good person if I can just get to those places. And that's an understandable calculus, but because we're so lost from ourselves, we have forgotten so much of our ways, we fail to realize that that's only a beginning. That's only a piece of the beginning. And that, as far as it goes for being a man, it's just not about you. It's not about us paying attention to what our story has been and what our inner condition is within this one body, that's that's not enough. That's not the entirety of liberation and healing. We have to continue the journey for the rest of our lives and into our offspring's lives. And by offspring, I don't mean necessarily our blood children. I mean all the generations after us. We have to continue the journey essentially for eternity. We have to have that willingness and that acceptance that this is for the long haul. I'm going to continue. My soul is going to continue to examine this, work on this, nurture this, repair this, and heal this, not just within myself, my immediate life, but within the world entirely. And so that what men are doing on the other side of the world from me is my duty to care about. It is my soil to work. It is my land to seed and water and sun and feed and raise. Wherever men are, there is my garden. And wherever men are, women are. So there is my garden. And I must be in kinship. I must be in relation. I must be sacredly listening to, compassionately listening to these stories, their testimonies. No one is not my teacher in this quest. I must humble myself. Oh, can it be painful for us as men to humble ourselves, especially to the testimony of women who, in their power divinely, often present for us a potency and a divinity that we as men can fear and in our own delusion see as a threat, when in fact that divinity is an aspect of our own salvation. And if that divinity is not free in the human world, we cannot be free. As men, we need so many more ceremonies. We need so many more ceremonies, right? Oh, we've only just begun. We've just begun. And the ceremony is so powerful because when we are with each other, it's like the difference between a single timid flute player playing alone in a corner of a bedroom and an entire symphony playing together and encouraging each other with the divinity of their music blending into ours. They encourage our music. So we become more confident, more full, more inspired. Ceremony is the potency of exponential alchemy, exponential power of the whole, of the group, that cannot even be calculated by examining and assessing the power of the individual. Because there's a mystery and a magic to what happens in the collective. When we come together as men and we come together in an open hearted way, in a humble and crushed way, in a broken hearted way, in a wailing way, in a grief stricken way, with tears flowing, admitting that we have not felt safe, that we too have been afraid in this world and in our bodies, that we have felt insecure and uncertain, when we come together in these ways where we've transformed ourselves from solidity to fluidity. We've treated ourselves like water. We've allowed ourselves to thaw from the freeze of our solidity, become mist and vapor and gas and water. We've let our molecules start dancing again. And we dance together and drum together and feast together and tell story together. Then we become this this tremendous hum of energy and spirit. We become the grandeur of our generations, and the ancestors begin joining into the chorus, and we feel all of it swirling through us and around us. We become and we become and we become whole, which we always have been, but we have forgotten and suppressed. Become whole in that ceremony, in that gathering. In the wholeness, we begin to remember. And the broken shards of amnesia fall away. We begin to see. And the glimpses become vision. And the whispers become song. And we arrive back to ourselves. So we need so many more ceremonies. Women thus far have, in the modern age, been much more comfortable with being together in ceremony. Men, we're still learning how to remember how powerful and strong it can be to be vulnerable. Hmm. So, Alexandre, the freedom we speak of, it is painful, painful sacrificing of the status quo. It is a sacrifice. It is a dying of a million deaths. It is hurt. It is terrifying. It is necessary. It is not comfortable or convenient. It is not the freedom to go on a cruise. It is not the freedom to go on a retreat. It's not the freedom to be a tourist in another people's land and wear their clothes and eat their food and take pictures of their children. It's not that. It's the freedom of death from these false identities that have devastated us. Mm. I pray for us to weep again, to become rivers again, just flowing, releasing all of our pain, hurt, and trauma, releasing all that we've been carrying and so terrified to admit to others and to ourselves. Pray for us to become rivers so we can reach the ocean, human emotionality, and join the ocean again, stranded in the desert and the drought of being tough, of being strong, of being forceful and mighty, of being warlike. Some of us, like you two, smell the scent of the sea from deep in the desert. We know we reach down into the sand and we can see the seashells. We understand that a desert is nothing more than an ancient, evaporated sea, and that we belong to the sea. We are salt beings, made of ocean, and we're made and meant to cry. So, yes, gentleness, gentleness, gentleness. Where can we find medicine and healing? We can go toward where there is gentleness. Where can we find safety? Go where there is gentleness? Where can we grow and recover and rest and bloom in the land of gentleness? How can we be in healthy, safe relations with ourselves and each other and with women? Try gentleness. Have you noticed these days with social media in particular available to us? Have you noticed the violence of ideas, meaning the violence with which we as humans are throwing our ideologies at each other? Have you noticed that? Like it's, the ideologies and the beliefs, but we're not lovingly sharing them with each other like a neighbor who bakes you bread and brings it to your front door because they know that you've been unwell. But that's not how we share ideas. We're sharing them very violently.
Yeah, and with it seems so little capacity to be stretched between conflicting ideas or paradox or to be able to hold nuance. It's like this is my idea that I get reflected back to me, and those people are wrong, evil in some cases.
Yeah, yeah, the language you just used was really important, I feel. I mean, we're so strict and rigid about it. We're so absolute and extreme. Um, and it's as though we don't even notice how violent we're being. We you see the comments on social media, on people's posts. They could have posted the most loving thing, but in the comments, it's this violence of being projected at each other like spears. And even when someone says, "Well, your spear just hurt me," and the person, just justifies their violence by saying that they're just, offering their insight, offering their opinion, normalizing and rationalizing their violence, not even realizing how they've just harmed someone completely unnecessarily. I guess this is coming up in me right now because I'm contemplating, this journey of man, and um, it's challenging to talk about it online because when you talk about anything online, you're likely to be attacked and assailed. You have to be you have to have really spent a lot of time getting to know your own language and how other people experience your language. And because, oftentimes we use language online and we don't intend for it to land the way that it does, but, you know, it, it lands and then there's a crater, and then we don't want to create more craters. And so then we go silent. So then we're afraid to talk about it. This is Women's History Month in March in the United States, at least. And there's much more of a comfort. There's much more of a comfort talking about what it means to be a woman and celebrating that. And that is, of course, because, you know, being a woman is a thing in 2025 that continues to live within the context of oppression. So when you try to talk about manhood, or even like Father's Day, I've observed this when that rolls around in June, and what the vibe is online, it's much quieter. There's a timidity. People don't want to, men in particular, don't want to say too much, don't want to celebrate too much. Why? Because of the history and the context, the harm that's been done. And so that's why this is coming up in me now. when I just contemplate our need to be able to talk with each other about what all this means and to find a way to express and receive less violently and more gently. It should not be taboo for us as humankind to talk about men. I mean, outside of we need the wholeness of the conversation in talking about men, meaning we need to not just have simplistic praise or uh, one-dimensional vilification. We need to be able, all of us, to grant ourselves permission to talk about this, talk about where we are, because everyone's suffering. In relation to manhood, everyone is suffering.
Jaya, I'm wondering if you might reflect a little bit on Eros. And there's so much sexual violence that is present. There's so much, youth being introduced to sexuality through pornography, just these dominant patterns, women reflecting on what the male gaze is that they experience. And uh, I appreciate in Dear Artist when you, on several poems, you write about just the sacred eros of becoming yourself, of deepening your soul, and how to for men to extract energy from those dominant, violent patterns that have been conditioned by media and so much of culture to reclaim this sacred generative aspect of themselves.
Mm, yeah, bless you, Carl. Thank you. That is rich, rich for us to work. Um, Eros. Again, violence mm, imprisons the violator. Okay. And so, because collectively men have perpetrated so much physical and sexual violence, along with other aspects of violence, I'm speaking in the collective across time. And I would say in relation, violence toward really everything. So, not just women, but physical and sexual violence toward other men, toward physical violence in toward the natural world and all living things, because there has been such a density of of that aspect of violence in our journey. What we've created as men, I'm speaking always in a collective sense, so that we can free ourselves from needing to defend individual men in the world and how individual men have existed and behaved. Of course, we understand the sovereignty of singularity, and we understand that not all men this and all that. We understand that, right? But to center that is itself a form of violence. And so we're centering in this moment what the collective journey has wrought for us and others. And when we consider Eros, because we have so desecrated the divinity that is Eros. Eros is the divine, sensual, sexual, generative, regenerative, creative aspect of our nature. It is passionate, it is flowering, it is yearning, it is longing. It, it is, Eros is a romantic, Eros is a poet, Eros is a musician, Eros lives in us. Eros is us. It is an aspect of our cells and molecules and atoms, and an aspect of our heart, an aspect of our mind and our spirit. So Eros is this profoundly pervasive poetry in the literature of who we are and what we are. But because we have desecrated it so much, we speak now of men, we as men, many of us are flooded with guilt and shame about our Eros. Guilt, shame, grief, that can show up, that can present as an aversion to our own Eros, a distortion, and mutilation of our own Eros, a silencing of our conversation about our own Eros. And then what happens with all of that is you have boys growing up, and no one is saying anything really at all to them about their Eros. They're completely alone with it, trying to figure it out. We have orphaned boys in relation to their Eros, in relation to their sensual, sexual nature. They're confused, they're frightened, they want to ask questions, but already they've been so conditioned that they feel it's weak to ask questions because they've already been confused with all these other ideas about dominant, controlling, lustful ways of being. But they've been told that's their Eros without using the word Eros. They've been told that's what that is, and so they're like, oh, okay, this is me. This is what I'm supposed to be, and I'm supposed to grow into this, right? So okay, so they're watching, and they're watching all these other men who were orphaned as children. All these millions and millions of other men were orphaned also as children in relation to their eros, their sensual nature, their sexual nature. Those men, therefore, are really just, in terms of their knowingness, they are still boys, they're still children, but they are behaving with the latitudes that adulthood brings to them. And so they're behaving out of an unknowingness. The current children are looking at that, the boys are looking at that and saying, okay, that's how am to be. Again, where are the ceremonies and the rituals and the rites of passage? Where are the teachers? Where are the spaces for boys to be safely students and learners? To become infused with a sacred understanding of that part of their nature. Where are those spaces? Where are those conversations? Where are those processes and those rites of passage? Where is the gardening? And so with social media and media in general, film and television, um, storytelling that is everywhere around our children, they are still seeing, witnessing very confusing narratives about their sensual and sexual nature, right? So when you're overwhelmed with all of that representation, all of that storytelling, all of that imagery, the pornography of being online, we could call it that. When you are literally immersed in drowning in the pornography of being online, and I use that language to say that we're at a place where essentially, if you are online, you are immersed in pornography because it is that pervasive. And so we're not speaking about the nature of pornography in this moment. We're speaking about the absence of sacred witnessing and sacred teaching and sacred learning, the absence of that, and then the pervasiveness of the pornography. It's that combination that is deadly because the children are trying dearly to figure it all out and they have their own natural impulses and feelings and ideas and experiencing beauty and joy in relationships of different kinds. And then, but that's also being mixed in within their own bodies and minds and spirits. All of that uh, organic vitality is being diluted and infiltrated with all this other storytelling. And so the question then is how can we help our young people and our men to learn how to discern between the two energies, the two spirits? Because often the boundaries are very blurred and hard to detect. How can we help? How can we help our people discern between the sacred eros and what it acts like, what it behaves like, what it looks like, and what it feels like? And then this other thing, which is essentially violence of desecration. That's my question within myself, for myself. How can we help one another discern? And in the discernment, how can we fortify and edify that discernment with collective ways of being together that affirm and encourage and celebrate and honor young people and men in our sacred behavior of eros, our sacred expression of eros. So we need the help with the discernment, the seeing, but we need support with the being, with the behaving, with the choosing. Yes, does this make sense?
Yeah, yeah. Both seem like the discernment and the practices, the embodiment of it and the modeling of it.
Yes, yes. Which is again why we need to be together in safe spaces. We need to be in ceremony, and we need to have our storytelling be spread out into different forms and modalities. So books, writing, songs, music, community, activities and projects, and just how we've always learned and grown through a variety of ways as human beings. And so we need that. We need the gardening to happen in all those kind of spaces and in all of those methods, if you will. Role modeling and the mentoring are among the most powerful when we talk about this issue. Parenting, role modeling, mentoring, exemplifying. Where are our exemplars? How can we more frequently place young people in the presence of these exemplars and exemplars in the presence of these young people? And then even within adulthood, because we don't want to orphan and give up on adult men, the same need is there. How can we provide men with more exemplars, mentors, guides, shepherds, big brothers, father figures to counteract the um, the shame-drenched bullying that happens when men attempt to behave in sacred ways. The ridicule that they receive from other men, I'm speaking of, and from women, to be honest, because again, on earth we've all been conditioned by the same pathogens, toxins, poisons. That's a big one, Carl, Eros. That's a big one. The body, mind, and spirit connection is such a powerful thing. And when it's aligned for its duty, for its design, it is miraculous. When it is misaligned, it is destructive.
Jaya, I just so appreciate every time that we get to sit together in ceremony, the rememberings that come alive. And this moment in time for me feels so much like we are recovering, re-remembering, reviving all these sacred kind of foundations for humanizing as a verb, not as, this kind of noun, this fixed kind of statue. Um, and I'm just thinking with everything that you've mentioned, I've had so much grief for a long time, which is turned into a passion for other models of being expressed as a man, like being a poet, a visionary, a healer, someone who is a medical with plants, all these other expressions which have just been pushed aside, and the corporate kind of image has come to the forefront, and that's the kind of image of being a man, this successful, making lots of money. All it's so old, right? Um, and I loved also in Freedom how you were speaking about how repetition of ideas can oppress people, and also repetition can be so sacred when we're repeating like sacred, humanizing ideas. And I'm just curious if you want, I mean, you've shared so many beautiful, potent, powerful ideas with us. I just wanted to give it a little bit more space if there are any other sacred, humanizing ideas that you feel like would really benefit menfolk these days.
I appreciate the invitation, Alexandre. So the repetition you speak of, we're speaking of essentially finding our own mantras that work for us. So a mantra is, an ancient practice of repeating, whether it's a sound, a syllable, song, saying, phrase, That a mantra could be sacred humming, like many of the monk cultures, you know, their sacred mantras that they are essentially vibrating together in a room, and that what that generates is very powerful. A mantra is an affirmation. It is necessary because our brain is designed to rewire itself according to stimulus that we send through it. This is the way the neurons are designed, the receptor cells. If we repeat a thought over and over again, the brain rewires itself to support the facilitation of that particular thought. So, because our brain is designed that way, repetition is necessary for us in the real world in our lives. It's just like going to the gym. If you lift a weight one time, no matter how heavy it is, you're not going to get much change, transformation. Repetition is the key to instigating the nervous system and the muscles to respond and grow and strengthen themselves. And so, mantra in our holistic existence, mantra is a very important aspect of changing and healing and growing. We do need repetition. We need it from within ourselves, whether silent or spoken. We need it from each other and with each other. Repetition also, we can go a little bit beyond mantra into the meadows of just kinship and kindred influencing of one another. Repetition still is a very vital aspect of that. We need to hear from each other over and over again, the reclaiming, affirming, reminding truths of life, because at all times, our mainstream culture is flooding us with its own mantras that enslave us, that cause us to not believe in ourselves, that disempower us and discourage us. So this this idea of repeatedly infusing ourselves with that which we want to be our condition, that's at the heart of what men need, of what we need, what we all need. Repeatedly, daily practice and choices that immerse ourselves in the condition we want to be in. If I want to be in a free condition, I need to spend time every day with things that are free. This is why I spend time in the wilderness. And, I spend time in the sky, on a mountain, in the desert, or the ocean, by a stream, even gazing at trees and plants, birds and insects, gazing at rabbits or deer, gazing at living things helps us to be free because we are witnessing those things in a condition of freedom. Um, as men, going back to the beginning of our conversation or early in it, when we spoke of gentleness, we need to expose ourselves daily to life being gentle with itself. If all we're doing is sort of reading about men puffing out their chests and starting wars all over the world, it activates in us. It activates our nervous system and our bodies into alarm. And in that condition of alarm, it's easy for the mind to begin convincing itself that war is necessary. War with my wife, my partner, my children, war with myself, my coworkers, war with people on the street, war with the woman who looked at me dirty in the grocery store, war with the person that drove by me and cut me off, war, 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 war. The more my body is in a state of alarm and emergency in the lizard brain, the adrenaline, here is the thing. We need to practices daily that help us to release and um, and stop the flood of cortisol and adrenaline in our bodies because those are war ingredients. They create inflammation in our body and they seduce us and tempt us and whisper to us to go to war. That's what those chemicals do when they accumulate in us chronically. And so we need the practices daily to release those chemicals and then to fill our bodies with the endorphins, the serotonins, not just because those help us feel good, but because they relax the body into a condition that makes it easier for our mind to then mobilize us in the direction of gentleness and nurturing and healing, creativity, resourcefulness, and dreaming again. Dreaming as in um, stoking the fire of hope and possibility, right? And so, um, yes, we are. For me, what is helpful is to just be reminding myself that at all times I am immersed unavoidably in an ocean of many toxins and many lies. And that because I am in that ocean, I need to be steadfast and devoted in generating my own inner ocean, my own devotion, sacredness, divinity. And I can do that to such an extent that it becomes the primary water that I experience. And the world's toxins become a secondary water that have a harder time getting through my water and reaching me. Soul water, always rising, always rising. So this is what has been helpful for me.
Ah, thank you so much, Jaiya. I just feel
Mhm.
like we're just getting started. This has to be part one. This has to be
Me
part
too.
one.
Let's do it again. Let's do it again. I, I have the same feeling. I have the same feeling. Because even your question there at the end about what we can do as men on this journey, this healing and remembering journey, that opens up a whole universe of possibilities. Um, we can be much more specific about. I feel that I'm always one who likes to encourage people to tap into their own divine intelligence and brilliance and come up with what is good for them and works for them. And I discourage people from falling into the temptation of just being a helpless baby bird in the nest, waiting to be fed, waiting to be told how to help yourself. You are a giant on earth as a living thing. All living things are. You are infinitely capable of activating and visioning and creating and accessing and crafting your own ways to heal and grow. And of course, many of those ways involve relations, learning from others, finding guidance. But you don't have to wait for someone to tell you how to learn to be a man sacredly. You can begin with your deep, loving breath, with your exhale, with your choice to release the violence from your body and your mind. You can begin right now because being sacredly a man is freely and always available to us. Always.
Beautiful. I feel just nourished to the bone through this whole conversation of part one.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I do as well. And I'm fed, you know. Thank you for just holding this space for us. It's a gift. Thank you.
Mhm. Thank you, Jaiya. Love you.
Yes, my love is full and entire and flowing to both of you. I love you. Please be well. Take wonderful care. And we will continue.
Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you enjoy this podcast, it's great if you want to share it with friends or post about it on social media. Also, you could make a donation to support the podcast or find out more information about our classes and offerings at our website, embodimentmatters.com.